Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Welcome back to the Daily Dose of Doom and Gloom. Wasn't going to make a video today, but the information is way too important not to share. It is very possible that in the next week we will be entering the nascent phase of the war between NATO, the hot war between NATO and Russia. I'm not talking about the Cold War. And there are three fundamental data points for your consideration. Number one, the counteroffensive is in full swing, primarily in the Zaporozhye, in the southern direction, as well as in the Donbass. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in just a minute. Number two is that the Ukrainians, Polish mercenaries, and Russian partisans are actually trying to invade Russia. Yes, you heard correct. They are invading Russia from the front, the frontier. From Ukraine, they are staging invasions into the motherland. Now, they are sending the Chechen forces, Kadyrov and his Chechens, to Belgorod to deal with this situation, and they're evacuating tens of thousands of people from that border region. That's how bad this is. I need to repeat that for anybody who didn't hear me the first time. They are invading Russia with NATO equipment and NATO-funded mercenaries. That's essentially what it boils down to. Let's not sugarcoat this at all, because we're getting down to crunch time. Number three, and perhaps most importantly, is you have the largest air exercise ever in NATO's history currently being conducted. Many are calling this a smokescreen for a war with Russia, which is what it is, which is the sole purpose of NATO, or the 90% of its purpose is for the sole purpose of deterring the Russians, containing the Russians, going to war with the Russians, conquering the Russians, let's just say it. And this is being construed as possibly an exercise to how they're going to enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine and possibly offer Polish or NATO forces air support in a war with Ukraine. But it's masquerading as an attempt to protect various NATO assets in NATO countries. Now, the worst possible case scenario is that this is in fact complete cover for an offensive on Moscow itself. Some people are speculating, and some people, so take it with a grain of salt, and I'm not predicting that the war is going to start. I'm just sharing with you these three data points that are all converging on the same point of time, which is very, very foreboding. It could very well be that a lot of these sorties that they are running into the Baltic as a part of this massive military exercise, including 10,000 people and hundreds of aircraft, may be misconstrued by the Russians as real world. The Russians overreact, they shoot down one of these airplanes, and then it's on. Or worse, that this is all just a smokescreen for a full-on offensive. Because remember, there are no military exercises, only World War III disguises. When the war actually starts, it will have to be under the guise of an exercise. And what better exercise to do it under than the biggest one ever conducted? So, we know that when we have these massive military exercises, that we have to presume that this very well may be NATO making their offensive maneuver. Now, we also have the U.S. planning on evacuating 80,000 of its inhabitants off of the island of Taiwan. You heard correct. They are planning, they're making contingency plans, I should say. They're just being prudent, nothing to worry about. They're not actually going to follow through with it when the war starts. We're going to stay there and support Taiwan to the end, right? Right. The U.S. is drawing up contingency plans in secret to evacuate all their citizens. They don't want another Saigon. They don't want another Sudan. They don't want another Afghanistan on their hands. You know, all those countries that they bailed out of when they could no longer hold it down. Well, they're just doing this, to make sure that those people don't get in the way of defensive maneuvers. It's not because they're worried about those people being bombed into submission and taken captive and engaging in a hot war with the Taiwanese. Because, of course, if you're the Taiwanese, nothing's going to inspire more confidence in knowing that your primary ally, the one goading you into a fight with the Chinese, is so confident in their ability to thwart a Chinese offensive that they are withdrawing all of their people, or drawing up plans to withdraw all of their people. So it's not looking good. We have the situation between the Wagner Group and the Russian Ministry of Defense heating up. What the Russians have done, and I do believe that shit is about to hit the fan, World War III style, for this reason, if not all the other reasons I've outlined, is that the Russians are really starting to consolidate their military now. All of these volunteer groups, be they the Chechens, various partisans, various groups like the Wagner Group, are being forced to sign contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense that is going to create a highly centralized top-down structure. So no more Wagner doing what it wants. It's now going to be bound by the bureaucratic red tape that the Russian government is. The Wagner Group is going to argue that this is going to make us far more inefficient, and they're probably right, because, you know, the government just gets in the way of things. You know, Wagner can do things that the government simply can't do for legal reasons and otherwise, and it also insulates the Russians from global condemnation. The Wagner is a great spearhead to draw the negative attention and the ire of the world who needs a scapegoat. So you can classify the Wagner Group as a terrorist organization without going to war with the Russians. But were they to classify the Russian Ministry of Defense as a terrorist organization, that's essentially a declaration of war. That's why the United States has been reluctant to do that, but they are okay with declaring the Wagner Group a terrorist organization. So this insubordination by Evgeny Prigozhin may well lead to a civil war, at least with the Wagner. Now, will the Wagner be turncoats? I don't think so. I still think that Wagner's primary allegiance is going to be to the Russians, and I'm pretty sure that Vladimir Putin is going to step in and smooth all this over. However, we are entering a situation where you have the Russians consolidating, you have all of these signals that they're about to do a greater mobilization. There are mixed messages about the success of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Some people are saying that it is going to plan. It appears as though a lot of people are underestimating the Ukrainians. This is not what you want to do at this point in time. The Russians allegedly are already making contingency plans for what they're going to do in Crimea if the Ukrainians make it that far. Now, this is according to Ukrainian media. Many people are going to say, no, you're crazy. The Ukrainians are never going to make it. Never say never. That's the, pride comes before the fall, as they say. And if you're a Russia bro, you need to be very mindful of the fact that they still have the unwavering support of NATO. And as this offensive crests, that's going to be right around the time of the summit at Vilnius. That is when we may well see some security guarantees being offered up, and of course, increasingly more and more military support. The United States has basically said, we're just going to keep replacing all of the equipment that gets damaged. So what that means is that Ukraine can lose Leopard tanks, they can lose Bradley vehicles, they're just going to keep replacing them. So what this all means is that, anybody with half a brain is going to be faced with the reality that this is not just a proxy war, okay? This is a direct war between NATO, who is by proxy using the Ukrainians to fight the Russians. There is no Russian proxy. It is the Russians, or there certainly won't be after the Wagner comes under the auspices of the Russian Ministry of Defense. Now, the Chechens heading to Belgorod could be sending a multi-pronged message. Number one, they're going to be up against guys who are of the same ideological ilk as they were fighting in Mariupol. I'm, of course, talking about the hardline right-wing Azov-style battalions of the Ukrainian military, as well as Russians who espouse the same crazy views. And they're sending the Chechens there because the Chechens like fighting Nazis. Okay, let's just be brutally honest about it. So that's probably why that move, but I think it's also to send a message to the Wagner, who, as I said, has been very insubordinate to the Russian Ministry of Defense. The Chechens readily signed the contracts with the Russian MOD, showing their allegiance. So they're ready to fall under that level of control, but the Wagner has yet to do so. But we'll see what happens. Ukraine is making minor gains here and there in the Zaporozhye direction. Apparently, a major general of the Russian military was taken out today. Still no word from Zaluzhny or Budanov, aside some really cryptic videos that they've been releasing, but I guess we'll see. Time will tell. As you can see behind me, the Canadian wildfire situation is exploding, continues to explode. Now one of the biggest fires, the second biggest in British Columbia's history, may well become the largest, is now 1 million acres burned. That's just one fire of thousands of fires. Justin Trudeau has confirmed that we will definitely be a nuclear target based on his recent visit to Kiev and their confiscation of a Russian plane that they're going to be gifting to the Ukrainians, along with $500 million, our tax dollars, I should add. And Russia is drawing up plans to evacuate Crimea, and what I mean by that is they're mining, allegedly now, they're mining this chemical facility, which is right at the crossroads of the Crimean Peninsula and the greater Ukraine. And they're saying that what they're going to do is, should it come to it, they're going to blow up this chemical plant, and that is going to drastically impede the Ukrainian forces' ability to come across if it gets to that point. Now, they could just slap on some CBRN gear, and that's probably what's going to happen. So it's a good time to invest in a CBRN company because the shit is about to hit the fan. Dubai has chosen to support Russia, it would appear. They are extolling the Russians through the, I don't know what you call it, like a laser show. They show the flag on the Burj Khalifa today. So this is obviously a very strong statement to the West where Dubai's allegiances lie. North Korea similarly has given Russia its full commitment. So what this could possibly mean is that the North Koreans may come to the aid of the Russians in terms of manpower. I'm quite certain that they're already happening. They're already helping in terms of the manufacturing of various weapons. North Korea has a sizable workforce of very intelligent, capable people who know how to produce weapons, and that's probably the capacity that the North Koreans are helping the Russians in. And this is a great way for them to do this by proxy to the Chinese. For the Chinese to help the Russians by proxy in terms of weapons is going to be through the North Koreans. And we have Japan preparing for North Korea's next satellite test launch. They are now saying that any interballistic, continental ballistic missile that they detect, especially in the Sea of Japan, they are going to target it. They're going to shoot it down, and of course, that is going to definitely beget a response from the North Koreans. Now, I want to read you guys something here. This is from a write-up by Johannes Stern, okay? Now, I've been talking about this air defender exercise for a long time, but they really put it in perspective here. Both the sheer scale of the exercise and its character make it clear that Air Defender 2023 is not simply a routine maneuver. This is targeting Russia, okay? It is a direct component of the NATO war offensive against Russia. Emphasis on offensive, not defensive. It is, and this is what the Russians interpret NATO as, an offensive force, whereas we view it as a deterrent or defensive. The Russians very much view this as offensive. And we're talking about the Luftwaffe hosting what appears to be an exercise simulating the start of World War III. I think that's going to get the Russians' attention, and not the good kind of attention. It is a direct component of the NATO war offensive against Russia. Representatives of the German ruling class in particular, which has already tried to subjugate Russia militarily in the two world wars, openly state this. Based on the script of the maneuver, this includes a comprehensive war effort against the nuclear armed power of Russia. According to a Wall Street Journal report, the baseline scenario they are preparing for involves the enemy taking the German port of Rostock, which I guess I can show you where that is on the map here. That's right off the Baltic Sea, okay? Right here, that's where it is, okay? and an attack that would trigger NATO's Joint Defense Clause known as Article 5. This response includes recapturing the port and other infrastructure, as well as defending cities and launching offensive measures. I'm pretty sure that nobody's capturing anything, that's just going to be taken out with a tactical nuclear weapon. But what do I know? Probably coming from Kaliningrad in T-minus 30 seconds. The other training elements also read like a blueprint for direct intervention in Ukraine, aka how to enforce a no-fly zone. The scenarios include the fight against drones and cruise missiles, the protection of cities, airports and seaports, protection of cities, no-fly zone, as well as direct support of ground troops. In addition, nuclear-capable F-16s. What is Ukraine getting? F-16s. We've been saying this for months. I was the first person to talk about how F-16s are a platform for the delivery of nuclear weapons. Then it occurred to Lavrov one night, and he started talking about it. Now everybody's talking about it. F-16s, F-35s, and Bundeswehr. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Bundeswehr. Germany is a fun language to try to mimic. Bundeswehr Tornado fighter jets will take part in the exercise, which, according to the Bundeswehr, will fly daily missions to Estonia and Romania, directly to the Russian border and towards the Black Sea. In doing so, and this is the most important part, the pilots and crews would fly according to the train-as-you-fight principle, which means the Russian military leadership would have to assume potential acts of war are being launched. Now, I'm going to presume that they're going to have their transponders on. That's probably going to be the only thing that's going to save them. But again, there are no military exercises, only World War III disguises. World War III may well start with transponders on. Okay, because if the transponders are off and you're flying near Russian airspace, it's game over. They're going to shoot you down, especially if we're talking about 12 F-35s like had happened yesterday at the conclusion of the Arctic 23 exercise, where I believe they even went into Russian airspace a little bit in the St. Petersburg direction. We're lucky we're all still here after that happened. So throughout the next week, while these exercises are being conducted, we are going to be on the razor's edge of nuclear Armageddon while this is going on. One misinterpretation by the Russians, we better hope that those back channels, the red line, is still very vital right now, because there is a lot of potential here for accidents to happen, and all it takes, it might not lead to an immediate nuclear confrontation, but what may happen is that one of these airplanes in the biggest NATO exercise ever conducted gets too close to Russia's borders. Russia scrambles some jets. Something happens in the sky. Somebody gets shot down. And it's on. And before we know it, there's a exchange. And that's when there's an emergency meeting if the Russians are the ones to take down. And that's when a response. And that's likely when it's going to be the impetus. Right now, the German people, according to a recent poll, 65% don't want a war with the Russians, obviously, because they're smart and they realize that that would involve World War III. And the Germans don't have nuclear weapons. They have a few of America's undeclared nuclear weapons on the European continent in 5 different countries, I do believe. But they don't have nuclear weapons of their own. But they're, I guess you could call them their former nemesis, the Brits and the French, do. Hopefully the Brits and the French actually come to their aid, and hopefully the NATO alliance is formidable enough that it doesn't wane in the face of certain nuclear Armageddon. So this is a very, very tense time in the coming weeks ahead because of this counteroffensive, because of the insane fighting that is currently going on, not only in Ukraine, but now in Russia. So much that they're evacuating thousands, tens of thousands of people from that border region. That's how bad it is getting. Vladimir Putin gave a speech today where he was doing a little bit of dog whistling. He was saying that those people who've already partook in some of the military activities, that they are going to be made officers. And this is exactly what Evgeny Prigozhin, Putin's chef, his right-hand man, I think Shoigu is just kind of there as, you know, he's just kind of there. but I think him and Evgeny are pretty tight. He said that if you sign up now, if you volunteer, you're not going to have to be cannon fodder at the front line. You will get a place at the table if you volunteer right now. This is why Russia's campaign to acquire volunteers, they want to know, who has the balls to fight. They want to know, okay, who are the people we can trust enough to fight? Now, you got to understand that there is so much subversion going on and so many agents, I would presume, and saboteurs that they got to be careful about some of these guys who are volunteering, right? So you run the risk of people volunteering who are spies or worse, saboteurs. But by and large, guys who volunteer for a fight are likely going to be more motivated, okay? They're running towards something as opposed to running away from something. So what they're trying to encourage people to do is volunteer now because the draft is coming. The large-scale mobilization is coming. I am getting vibes that this Ukraine offensive is going to be somewhat successful and that they may even make it to Crimea. I know it sounds crazy. Right now you got Russian Tu-95 Bear bombers in the air as we speak. Completely, they're probably just going to resort to carpet bombing at this point. And that's when you're going to start to see Kiev either start evacuating again. You're going to see the embassies sounding the alarm, people moving their people out. This shit could get really, really hot in the coming weeks ahead. So that is what is going on in the world today, guys. Russian generals being taken out, and I think they're done their service at 65 anyway, so this guy wouldn't have had much longer by the looks of him, but not looking good at all. What else is going on the front lines that I can talk about here? As Ben Hodges indicated, and I'm not a big fan of Ben Hodges. He's been right about some things, wrong about others, but when a guy like this talks, former general of the NATO forces in Europe, when he says that Ukraine is right now just doing a preparatory operation, you can interpret that one of two ways. This is just misinformation to try to make it look like they're doing better than they are, or he's right and they are actually mobilizing, I've heard some estimates of around 100,000 guys, 15 to 20 battalions, brigades of troops getting ready to do some sort of blitzkrieg type maneuver. How they do with that when the Russians have them outgunned in terms of artillery, I guess is yet to be seen. We know that the defense contractor Raytheon, another investment tip for you guys, will increase the production of Patriot batteries to 12 per year. That's a lot. According to CEO Greg Hayes, additionally 5 batteries will be delivered to Ukraine by the end of this year. I have a sneaking suspicion that Patriot missile defense systems are going to be in great demand, even though we know that the Russians did successfully do some damage to the one in Ukraine. But why do they all of a sudden need another 5? Interesting, isn't it? So we have the Chechens, Kadyrov's troops heading to fight in Belgorod. The Akhmat detachments of Ramzan Kadyrov were sent to Belgorod, Z Media reports. And do we have some images of Kadyrov and friends? I don't think we have any of that up there, but they have been fighting throughout. I think they took a bit of a break after they conquered Mariupol. But now they're coming back into the fight. Apparently, epic battles of the Russian Volunteer Corps against Akhmat are waiting for us soon, writes the AP Wagner channel. So the Wagner, they do respect the Chechens. He does respect General Surovkin because he has had military experience. As far as I know, Sergei Shoigu, the absolute head of the Russian Ministry of Defense, has not had any real-world military experience, frontline experience, directing, groups into war. Chechens may send thousands of Rosgvardia, Defense Ministry and police fighters to the Belgorod region to fight saboteurs. Now, apparently the people in Belgorod aren't too happy about this. They're saying, why don't you just give us guns? Which makes me think that this is definitely a centralization. Because remember, before they sent these guys there, Vladimir Putin made them sign a contract, whatever that means. I guess it just means that you're going to take your orders from the Russian MOD and you're not going to act independently, autonomously. So the people in Belgorod are concerned. Now, I'm wondering if Putin is concerned that of the allegiances of these people in Belgorod, as to whether or not he can trust them. I think that that's what this comes down to. And nothing says trust like Vladimir Putin. I don't have the picture here, but today he gave a speech for Russia Day or whatever it was. And basically he was sitting, there was probably, I don't know, there must have been 30 or 40 feet between him and the audience. So you know the whole long table thing? Putin definitely fears for his life. I think that's obvious at this point in time. He doesn't know who he can trust. So he wants that barrier, maybe so that if somebody was using a handgun, it's far enough away that they probably couldn't get in a good shot, right? So, you know, after a certain range, handguns are very unreliable in terms of their accuracy. So it almost seemed like if somebody did smuggle a handgun into that affair, then they wouldn't have been able to. And of course, he's wearing all kinds of bulletproof vests and stuff like that. But this is what you have to do during these times. I mean, you got a lot of people who are probably out to get you. And the more autocratic and authoritarian you become, the more paranoid you have to become. Now, I'm not going to state my thoughts on Putin's motives, whether or not he loves his country, whether or not he's patriotic. I do believe to an extent he probably is. And we need to understand the Russian paranoia is rooted in real-world historical trauma. If we were invaded every way from Sunday several times throughout our history and lost millions of people, we would be as paranoid, especially if our adversaries were all around our border. So Russia is totally justified to be completely paranoid of NAZIs on their border when in fact NAZIs are currently invading their country. This is what they're doing. They're sending the kids off to Siberian military patriotic training schools. We talked last year about how this year they were really starting to train teenagers how to handle weapons, how to do chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear training drills. They're prepping the bomb shelters. They're getting ready for all-out war. Now they're centralizing the command because that's what you need to happen right before mass mobilization. They're checking off all the boxes. Men baptized by fire to take key positions in Russia's army in the future, Putin claims. So he's saying, if you want to be an officer, if you want to push pencils, and you don't want to be pushing bush, then you better get your ass out there in the field now while it's hot but not too hot, and maybe we'll see what we can do. And they're slowly shifting towards a total war economy. That's obvious. According to SIPRI, I can't remember what that stands for. Something Switzerland, I believe, or Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, there are more nuclear weapons deployed than there were last year. Tell us something we don't frickin' know. What else do we got to talk about here today? We got Dubai. This is the Burj Khalifa today. They've clearly chosen the Russians with this type of pageantry celebrating. This is from a NAFO guy, as you can see. Apparently Dubai is celebrating a country of looters, rapists, and murderers. Right. Okay. That's what they believe. North Korea's Kim offers full support to Putin on Russia Day. So there you have it. And North Koreans have a lot of guys who work in the remote regions of Siberia and a lot of the logging camps and stuff. Japan extends a destroy order for North Korean missiles. This is that article that talks about how the U.S. is preparing evacuation plans for Americans in Taiwan. Just worst case scenarios. Not really going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen the way that we're going. And the U.S. is going to sell drones to Taiwan and provocative intelligence sharing plan. The shit's hitting the fan, guys. Get ready while you can. Oil prices plummeted and probably on fears of a recession. I'll say this. Oil is only going to be in greater demand in the future, especially when the real war, the real hot war between NATO, however long that even lasts. But oil is going to be in great demand. Right now, the Biden administration is probably very excited because now they can potentially start filling up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which as of this week is at a record low since sometime in like 1980. Meanwhile, the Chinese is at a record high. Okay, Chinese at record high. They're building mobilization centers. I was talking to Green Greggs today. Go and check out his channel. He's a rocket scientist, self-proclaimed redneck rocket scientist. Very cool dude. Knows a lot about stratospheric balloons. And we talked at length about the capabilities of these stratospheric balloons and why they are potentially a major game changer in the coming wars ahead. And they're likely going to get more attention in Russia soon as well when that conflict heats up. I think that's pretty much all I have to share with you today, guys. I want to show you something else. You know, we got a lot of gear reviews planned because we've been doing this daily dose of doom and gloom stuff, and I don't want you guys thinking that's all we do around here. We have a lot of big videos, perennial type content coming up for you, but this is a new flashlight. This is 120,000 lumens. You guys have seen the 100,000 lumen monster. Well, get a load of this. How's that? You seen the white light? Don't worry, that's what you're going to see before the nukes go off. Just don't look at the nuke, because you'll lose your eyesight apparently. Apparently that's a little bit overplayed in the movies. It's not exactly going to happen like that, but we're going to be doing reviews of this and other things. You can get one of these at CanadianPreparedness.com. For perspective, okay, 120,000 lumens. The first flashlights ever invented were around 5 lumens. 5. And they called them flashlights because the battery power of the time would only permit for it to make a flash. So the police who use these, they would deploy them, like let's say there was a criminal in a back alley. They could push the button and it would briefly flash and then it would go dim. And they would have maybe 10 to 20 flashes per battery cycle. That's why it's called a flashlight. This is 120,000 lumens, turbo mode with a self-cooling fan. This will literally fry the retinas out of your enemies. This is something that I can't believe is not illegal yet. We've shown you the white blinding laser lights. Those are a higher candle power, so they have a higher beam intensity, so they're actually brighter than this. But this has the most out the front lumens of any flashlight on the market, and it's like daylight, okay? It's insane. And it gets very hot. You can light fires with this thing. You could blind a whole army. In fact, talking about history, in Vietnam, they had a light that they used. It was like this light that emitted this flash. And I believe that was only something like 20,000 lumens. And what they would do is they would light up a region. It was kind of like the flash on a camera before they attacked a place in order to blind the enemy. This thing, it's so blinding that you're not even going to know where the light's coming from. So, you know, if you're a sniper or something and somebody turns this on, I mean, don't stand out there in the middle of a field with this thing on. I'm just saying that this is going to mess with somebody's optics. And this very well does have a tactical utility. Go check it out, CanadianPreparedness.com. I will post a link in the description. We got that and many other very cool things that I guarantee you've never seen before in the preparedness space. We're going to keep it going. We're going to keep playing the violins while the Titanic sinks. Over here, anything else I got to share with you today? Just the forest fires raging out of control. As you can see here, big fires are unfolding as we speak. And if you guys want information about what's going on in the war, I recommend 4 maps. This is the Russian fortifications map. That's on Google. Just type in Russian fortifications map. I'll post a link in the description. This is a Russia-Ukraine war map, which shows you, it delineates Russian-held territory and Ukrainian-held territory. This is the military deployment map, so it shows you specifically what groupings of troops, battalions, brigades, platoons are where the fighting is to a certain extent. And this is live UA map. This is a very pro-Western map. So this kind of gives you not only real-time updates on what's happening where, but it also gives you some pictures and videos at times. So right now the lines haven't moved that much, but they're making these small gains. And it's all right now, it's an information war. And what the Ukrainians are trying to do is encourage the Russians to basically give up and surrender. And they're doing that by waging information warfare. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. And here is the smoke fire map. Major fires in the west out here. It's smoky right now where I'm at. And looks like right now, yeah, we're seeing, well, it's kind of clearing up a little bit. But the jet stream's all wonky right now. And we have some massive fires in here burning near Edson. I would hate to be. I mean, the town of Edson, look how close this fire is to Edson. Holy shit. Man, you guys better have an escape plan if you live in Edson. Edson is a sizable community. It's no small potatoes. I mean, it's probably around 20,000 people or something like that. Then you got Hinton, and Edmonton is not too far from there also. So stay ready, get your fire mask, CanadianPreparedness.com. That's how we support this channel before or after we get deplatformed. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Canadian Prepper out.